Hi, this is Kent Darcie. What you are going to hear is from the second series of audio programs I recorded for Trans World Radio that address the basic issues that adults with divorced parents can face. We decided that we would put this series on YouTube as well. In this second series of 10 programs, we address some issues like dealing with our parents' different worlds, fear of conflict, fear of abandonment, and other issues. But here's a couple of basic things you need to know about this series. First, these programs were created for a men's ministry, so I'm talking to men. However, the principles and issues we'll talk about apply to everybody. Second, this program was created for an international audience, so occasionally you might hear something that is not American, but it's pretty rare. But I thought I'd give you a heads up. Lastly, there are a lot more resources for adults with divorced parents at our website, hopeforadp.com. Hope you find this series helpful and shareable. Take care.
John celebrated his parents' 35th anniversary with family and friends. One day, 6 months later, his phone rang. He saw Mom on his screen. He put down what he was working on and answered, "Hi, Mom. This is a surprise. I didn't think we'd talk until next weekend. What's up?" John hears, "Hi, John." Then there was a long pause. "Mom, are you okay?" Finally, his mother says, "It's over." John's confused. "What's over? What are you talking about, Mom?" "John, I'm sorry to tell you this, but you're the oldest, so I thought you should know first. Your father and I are getting a divorce." There's more conversation, but John doesn't remember any of it. All he knows is his world has radically changed. Welcome to Champions Arise. I'm Steve Dealy, here with Kent Darcie. Kent is the founder of Adult Children of Divorce Ministries. As we continue this series on the issues adults with divorced parents face, today we'll talk about the fastest growing area of divorce, gray divorce. Gray divorce is the term for divorces that occur after 20, 30, or even 40 years of marriage. We'll discuss its impact on the adult children when we return to Champions Arise. Kent, I've heard of people divorcing later in life, but I didn't realize it happens so much. It's the fastest growing area of divorces?
In Western countries, yes. I haven't seen enough data in the non-Western countries, but I suspect it's increasing there too.
For those of us who are hearing about this for the first time, or maybe in this way for the first time, why would someone divorce after 35 years of marriage? You'd think that by then they would have worked out the rough spots.
Well, that doesn't seem to be true in a number of marriages. The reasons vary, but the majority fall into the category of, I'm unhappy, I don't see things changing, and I don't want to spend the last 30 or so years of my life miserable.
Well, I think about John, who I talked about at the beginning of this program. I can't imagine getting a call like that. Kent, you said that a lot of these spouses are unhappy. If that's true, why do they wait so long to get a divorce in the first place?
Well, I'll mention a couple of reasons, and both revolve around our topic today, the impact on the adult children. The first is the parents feel freer to leave the marriage after the kids are out of the house, like when the last child leaves for college. The other reason is because they believe that since their children are grown, the divorce, won't affect them.
But I'm guessing that's not true.
Well, you're correct. It does affect them, and mostly in negative ways. The one sort of positive is, as an adult, they can deal with the emotions and turmoil the divorce usually creates from an adult perspective.
And how does that help?
Well, for example, a 32-year-old is far less likely to blame themselves for the divorce than a 12-year-old.
Which makes sense.
Yeah. Age also helps the adult child to deal with anger, depression, unforgiveness, and other issues that come up in a more constructive way.
They still have those issues, though.
Oh, yes, and more.
And we'll get into those in just a moment. But I want to let our listeners know that this is Champions Arise. I'm Steve Dealy, and I'm with Kent Darcie, who is an author, speaker, and he's also the founder of Adult Children of Divorce Ministries. As we continue this series on how adults with divorced parents are still impacted by their parents' divorce, we're talking about the growing trend of parents divorcing after the kids have left the home, which is called gray divorce. Kent, you said when parents divorce later in life, or gray divorce as we call it, it can create several challenges for the adult children. Can you give me some examples?
Sure. Let's look at 5 challenge areas adults face when their parents divorce later in life. The first is the experience of very traumatic life event, but they lose many of their supporting mechanisms. When gray divorce occurs, 3 key areas of support, parents, siblings, and friends, can all be lost. And if you aren't married and have a spouse for support, that is very problematic.
I kind of understand losing parents, but why siblings and friends?
Well, brothers and sisters tend to choose sides. And it's not always, the guys with the father and the girls with the mother. Sometimes it's based on the relationship they had with the parent before the divorce. Feelings can be very strong for or against a parent. And with friends, the problem is different. Proverbs 27 verse 10 says, "Better a neighbor nearby than a relative far away." Proverbs 18 verse 24 says, "There is a friend who sticks closer than a brother." But friends don't understand the hurt, the confusion, anguish, the anger that adult children of divorce feel. As a result, they will say things like, "Well, it's a good thing you're older, so it's not a big deal."
Really?
Oh, yeah. Or, "Your parents are old enough to make their own decisions," which is true.
But certainly is not very helpful or understanding of the situation.
No. Here's another one. "I don't understand why you're so upset. Your parents deserve to be happy, don't they?"
I guess people mean well, but they seem to be missing the real point.
Exactly. The point is every holiday, birthday, funeral, wedding, social event, everyone will be different, and often not for the better, because you will have 2 people there who don't want the other one to be there.
There is so much to talk about on this topic, but I do want to get your points in, Kent. The second challenge gray divorce creates with the adult children?
Well, gray divorce creates guilt because the adult children are forced to choose sides.
What do you mean forced?
If mom has one lawyer who is claiming a set of grievances, and dad has another lawyer who is claiming the opposite, Steve, whose side do you choose? Well,
I never thought of that.
Well, most people, including the parents, haven't. They also don't think about the third challenge gray divorce creates with their adult kids, and that is the ongoing worry the kids shoulder because now mom or dad doesn't have the financial or health support they had when they were together. I mean, think about it. Why do many men go to the doctors?
Well, only because they are very ill or their wife tells them to.
And that may sound funny, but lots of research shows married men live longer, and that's one reason. So the adult child worries about this, and in some cases takes on the responsibility of handling that in ways that they wouldn't have to if their parents were still married.
And that is a heavy burden.
It is, which leads us to the third challenge gray divorce causes for the adult children, a problem with boundaries. If the divorce happens when the children are still in school, good parents will tend to shield them from the ugly side of the divorce, why it's happening, etc. But gray divorce parents often treat their children as friends and not their kids. As a result, they will tell them things about their other parent that really is private information and shouldn't be shared. But the adult child feels that they are unsupportive if they don't listen.
So even as adult children, they must feel like they lose either way.
They do, because most love their parents. Both of their parents. Having to hear your mother or father verbally attack the other is just very painful.
It must be. Kent, I'm just surprised how little of this we've heard before.
Well, it's not a popular topic. One reason is the fourth challenge gray divorce creates. The adult children now re-examine their own family history. Was it real? Was it all an act? Now, this is particularly hard when parents tell them that they only stayed together because of them. Because they're adults, they should just understand. But they don't. And often, they have no one to talk to about it.
I'm so glad that we're discussing this. I'll be more sensitive when I hear someone talking about this.
Well, that's why we're covering this topic. It affects so many people, and they need the love of Christ demonstrated to them. Christ is compassionate and gives unconditional love. And that's what you or your friends need when gray divorce happens.
So far, we've looked at how gray divorce, that's parents divorcing when we're adults, creates challenges for the adult children by limiting the availability of support, causing them to choose between parents, making parental boundaries unclear, and causing them to re-examine their childhood. So, Kent, what's the last challenge we'll look at today?
I personally think the last challenge is the worst one. It creates doubt about their own marriages.
How does gray divorce do that? I don't understand.
Well, think about it. If your parents are married for 35 years and you're having trouble in your own marriage, there's a good chance you'll look at them and say, well, if mom and dad could make it through their challenges, we probably can too. But if they divorce after 35 years, suddenly you're thinking, if they couldn't make it after all that time, how can our marriage survive?
That makes sense.
And don't forget, we're in a spiritual war. Satan doesn't want our marriages to succeed. 1 Peter 5, verse 8 says, your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. So it's important to stay focused on the Lord in prayer, reading the Bible regularly, and fellowshipping with Christ followers.
That's so important for all of us, but particularly those impacted by gray divorce. What else can a listener do if they're experiencing this?
Well, the first thing I would encourage the listener to know is they are not alone, and their feelings are probably normal. Anger, frustration, hurt, despair, confusion, wanting to cry, filled with grief, all normal. Consequently, I would say listen to the first set of programs we did on common issues that affect adults with divorced parents. You'll hear the link in a moment, but just about everything we discussed in that series and this one applies to what you're experiencing.
And that's good to know.
It is, but also know that God is with you. The Bible says he is a father to the fatherless in Psalm 68, verse 5. In Hebrews 13, verse 5, God says, I will never leave you nor forsake you. In difficult times like these, God is with us.
Very comforting words. And thank you, Kent, for this fascinating look at gray divorce. I hope our listeners learned as much as I did. And for those who are experiencing their parents' divorce later in life, may God be your strength and shield. We'll be right back with Champions Arise.
Thanks for listening to this presentation. I hope you found it helpful and will continue to listen to this important series. Also, you can find a variety of resources for adults with divorced parents on our website, hopeforadp.com. That's hope, the number 4, adp.com. Thanks for listening, and please share this with anyone you feel this could help. Thanks.